Well, ladies and gentlemen, another day in Retardanistan, and so let's get on to the retardation that is our political news. But before I do, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Really does help. Help a brother out. Hit the bell icon. Join the channel. In any case, the first news story is one that you will know all about. So this is the police minister who's currently underneath legal scrutiny for being placed on leave instead of being fired. Now, former President Jacob Zuma and the MK party have argued that the police minister should have been dismissed following misconduct allegations. And the police minister submitted an affidavit to the Constitutional Court that Cyril Ramaphosa acted lawfully and not out of ANC factionalism or favoritism. Now, the controversy highlights the ongoing legal and political battles within the ANC, particularly as Ramaphosa faces pressure from both the opposition and former allies like Jacob Zuma. Now, one of the arguments made was, why'd you fire Andrew Whitfield and not the police minister? And according to the police minister, he has now suggested that's because Andrew Whitfield broke the rules, but he didn't. And so that's why Andrew got fired, but he didn't. Yeah, you can let me know what you think of that argument in the comment section below. So on then to the next news story. And this is around the Trump's tariff. So what's the latest? Well, Donald Trump has announced a new tariff regime starting from the 1st of August, setting a global minimum of 15%, rising to 50% for hostile or uncooperative nations. Now, South Africa currently faces a 30% trade tariff and may not be eligible for a reduction despite lobbying by the Department of Trade and Industry. Now, trade experts and former WTO official Johan Human warns that South Africa could face 40% tariffs if BRICS membership penalties are applied. He said that the US is also upset about non-tariff barriers, including black economic empowerment policies, local content rules, and excessive regulations. And all of that's, to be frank, rather correct. Now, Human notes that South Africa lacks a US ambassador and does not prioritize diplomacy, while other nations, Japan, Vietnam, South Korea, have all been negotiating better deals with the United States, and Pretoria itself has just sidelined itself. So the consequences are, if the tariffs go ahead, South African exports will be priced out to the US market, which means that they're just not going to buy from us. This, as you know, will significantly impact jobs, investor confidence, and manufacturing sectors. Now, one of the areas that Trump targeted very early on when he first came to office was around the funding which he slashed from PEPFAR, that's the Presidential Emergency Plan for AIDS relief. Now, he did this in February, which effectively halted support for high-risk groups that included sex workers, LGBT individuals, teenage girls, trans people, and drug users. Now, despite the US Congress blocking $400 million of those cuts in July, the waiver limiting aid remained. Now, the key points here are that 27 high-risk projects remain closed in South Africa with no new funding being presented, which could effectively reopen these projects. So what's the net result of this? It would appear that what South Africa is intending to do here is to shift this focus from treating HIV to prevention of HIV. So what they're attempting to do is reduce infections and promote prevention because they don't actually have the money anymore to treat HIV or AIDS. So this is actually all really important because news came out that over 250,000 healthcare workers have quit or left South Africa since 2013. So since 2013, 125,123 health workers have resigned, and this includes 12,745 doctors. It's about an average of 1,000 a year. That's 58,897 nurses, 1,341 pharmacists, 28,199 other healthcare professionals, 23,941 admin staff. This spike was mainly seen between 2021 and 2023, reflecting burnout, budget costs, and immigration. That should be a surprise to nobody. Now, many cited the incoming NHI, the National Health Insurance, as a reason for leaving. Now, the South African Medical Association actually warned that South Africa has just 0.3 doctors per 1,000 citizens, which is far below the WHO's recommendation of a 2.5 minimum. Now, healthcare workers are in hard demand overseas, especially in Canada, Ireland, and Europe, with many of those countries being very keen to take out professionals. So, what exactly is the NHR going to look like in terms of the taxes that you and I have to pay? Well, the Health Funders Association has now estimated that the NHR will mean that personal income tax will be raised by 2.2 times what it currently is. In the worst case scenario, healthcare could cost 44% of the national budget. VAT may have to raise from 15% to 36%. These guys are cooked. Now, the key issues are that private medical aid schemes will effectively be banned from covering services offered by the NHR, with 83% of the 9.91 million medical aid users, all of which will be severely impacted. Now, the Health Funders Association warns that a 43% reduction in care access, even in the best case scenario, would occur because of the shared funding models. So it would ultimately lead to the collapse in private care and rationing of services. So Discovery CEO Adrian Gore said the NHI tax model will wreck the economy. People will pay more tax and receive worse care. But I would say to this, Adrian Gore, you supported it, ergo you are complicit in it, and you are a traitor to the healthcare. It's just my opinion. In any case, the minister, moron, also known as Aaron, I despise this commie moron like you cannot believe, insists that the NHI is non-negotiable. And of course it's non-negotiable for these tools, because whenever things become really bad, they just piss off to another country, Singapore or Russia or somewhere else, and get professional treatment there. They're not going to have to deal with this like the rest of the plebs on the ground floor. They never do. Let us not forget that Robert Mugabe got all of his treatments in Singapore. In any case, during the 2025-2026 health budget vote, he outlined 3 goals. One was to lay the groundwork for universal healthcare, NHR, and I must remind you, we do currently have universal healthcare right now. There are public hospitals everywhere. They just happen to be shit, and they are broken. The infrastructure is half-put. It's not like we don't have it. In any case, another priority for his budget was the combat of diseases and reform of private healthcare. Now, that reform of private healthcare thing, that freaks me out a little bit, because that means that the government's attempting to interfere within the private healthcare sector. Never a good idea. Now, criticisms of the NHR include the lack of transparent funding mechanisms, and people have been talking about this for the longest time, because there is no viable funding mechanism. You saw the palaver it was going to cause when just raising VAT from 15 to 17%, then 15.5%. And this cuckoo thinks that he's going to raise it to what, like 36%. The guy's just nuts. In any case, one of the other criticism of it is the destruction of the freedom of choice of healthcare. And I want to opt out of any public control of healthcare, because I've seen how the public sector controls anything. And it's shit. And we must highlight, it's shit. Name for me one industry in the state that actually works. I'll put money on it. I mean, SARS is probably the only one, so you can't say SARS. Everything else is just freaking broken. There's nothing there that the government touches that does well. You want me to rely on my healthcare with these nut jobs? In any case, projections show government underestimates the costs. They're aiming for 200 billion, while private estimates suggest up to 1.3 trillion. Now, I myself would comment on that and say, yes, it's in the government's best interest to downplay the costs, because if people really knew what was going on, they'd be freaked out. Now, public healthcare is already under strain. They've lost 9,000 workers in the past year alone. And the finance minister admits budget reprioritization means there's no funds to rehire. So they're losing doctors and they've got no money, but don't worry, we're going to just take on the entire sector. I mean, this is exactly why I said this guy is just cooked. He is just a retard of note. Moving on to the next news story, and this is that since 2022, at least 10 ANC councillors have been killed in execution-style hits in the Eastern Cape. Now, the motives of these are suggested as tender disputes, factionalism, and political intolerance. and a few arrests have been made, and most cases remain unsolved. This is obviously very important given the suggestions of the ANC manipulation of the Political Killings Task Force in KZN. Now, many analysts are warning that violence could worsen with ANC killing off itself in the 2026 municipal by-elections. Now, law enforcement seems ill-equipped and unwilling to protect its councillors, and to the rest of us, we just notice that the ANC just loves to kill itself, all over tenders. Let's move then on to a very final news story of today. And this is a story of election results. So recently some by-elections occurred and the results were rather telling. So Gator Mackenzie's PA won Ward 27 in Drakenstein Paul. Now this was a DA stronghold and the DA lost it. This marks the PA's second Western Cape win in many months, their last win being Mossel Bay. Now the PA's growth taps into dissatisfaction amongst coloured farm worker community, many of whom are now shifting from the DA to the PA. Other results included the ANC regained outright control of Kimberley. They were in a minority government there before, and now they've got full control over that ward. The EFF collapsed everywhere with their support dropping from 22% to 8%, and the DA won Ward 6, but with a reduced majority down to 44.6%. Now, no party has exceeded 50% in any of the contested wards, highlighting growing fragmentation of the electorate. And this is exactly what we're seeing now going into the next elections. This is why coalition politics are becoming so important, because it looks like coalitions are going to be here to stay. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, you can let me know what you think in the comment section below. Anyway, these are all just my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments. Until Monday, bye.